So we want to look at some big idea in math, and one of the big ideas in math is this idea of a function machine. And it's this idea of this input-output machine that we have. Okay, and a function can be thought of something that we input into. Okay, we take some input, we do something to it, and we get an output. Okay, so for example, we can think of multiply by 5 as a function. We can take a number, multiply it by 5, and we get an output. So a function can be defined by this f of x, by this input-output machine. We can define functions as equations. For example, we can get our output y is equal to 5 times some input x. Okay, so this would be like a times 5 function. Okay, we can do lots of things. We can do a function machine as square root of x. Okay, so any input, we do something, we get an output. Okay, so it can be defined as this flow chart. It can be defined as equation. We also want to define functions as this table. So this table represents some input output. Okay, so we have an input of 3, output of 5, input of 8, output of 10, input of 9, output of 11. Some of you may be able to guess what this function is, but regardless of what it is, what it's doing inside, this idea of a table, an input and output table, is also a function. So this function flow chart is a function. This input output is a function. Just as much as this some y equation, y equals 5x. Just as much as this is a function, we define functions like this. We define functions as tables. So that's a big idea of function machine. There's another big idea involved in this function machine is this idea of opposites or inverse. So if I do something one way through a function flow chart, I can always undo it with some other operation. So for example, if I times by 5 this way, I can divide by 5 to undo that times by 5. If I square root, I can square root this way, and I can undo it with the inverse or squaring, or other way around. I can square this way, and I can undo that squaring by square rooting. I can add 2, I can undo that add 2 by subtracting 2. Okay, so if I go one way through the function machine, so here I go 3 plus 2 gives me 5, I can go the other way. I can take my 5 and do the opposite minus 2. So instead of plus 2 this way, I'm going to minus 2 this way, and I get my input 3. So there's two big ideas here. This idea that functions can be described with an equation, with a flowchart, function flowchart, as a table. The other big idea is this idea of opposites. We can go through a function left to right, okay, and we can undo it right to left. Okay, and we have operations that always do this. Now, some of them we know very well, like times and divide, plus and minus, square and square root. But even if we don't know what it is, these exist. Okay, we have a f of x, and we have the inverse of that f of x. Okay, so these are the two big ideas that we want to make sure we understand when we talk about functions in mathematics.